The push for anime movies has had every community in a chokehold, with every fandom wanting their own Demon Slayer Mugen Train / Infinity Castle, both are great by the way, or Jujutsu Kaisen Zero. But is it a good idea for One Piece to follow this trend and dip into the canon movie pool? In this video, I want to go over why a canon God Valley movie would be an awful idea and some suggestions for what movie could be released instead. It's not confirmed as yet if they are going to be making a God Valley movie, it just seems the most likely based off what's happening in Toei right now, but it is also entirely possible that we don't get that movie. But without any further delay, let's get into it as we see why a canon One Piece movie is not a good idea. Before I say why it's bad, however, I do want to go over why it's a good idea to show you all why exactly it is that people are pushing so hard for this, because knowing why people want it so bad will help you understand why it's not actually going to fulfill any of the things that people expect from it. One reason is that they believe it will put more eyes on One Piece. Both Demon Slayer movies and the JJK movie actually help boost the popularity of those two series a decent bit, and Demon Slayer is basically the anime movie staple of the industry. I can almost guarantee that the rest of the Demon Slayer franchise leading into the endgame is probably going to be adapted into another 2 to 3 movies and then just pieced out into the anime afterwards. Another reason people want a God Valley movie is that they believe it will allow for a more fleshed out adaptation, better fight scenes, and better animation. It is a lot easier to pour a heavier budget into an animated movie than it is for animated episodes, so the already godlike animation we get for current One Piece would carry through the entire movie for God Valley, leading to a stellar viewing experience. And lastly, it would just be really cool to see God Valley in a movie. This basically goes back to the other two. People have wanted a God Valley movie for so long that once we actually got God Valley, it's like the only thing that anybody reading the manga could think about. No one was expecting to get God Valley in Loki's flashback, so the anticipation for a canon One Piece movie is now currently at an all-time high, as we are just now getting out of Loki's flashback. These are the main reasons I see why people are so adamant on a canon God Valley movie. And while these may even be hype to me and make it seem like a God Valley movie would be good for all of us, Toei included, based off the way the God Valley has gone in the canon story, it would actually be awful for this movie to be made. For starters, One Piece isn't as popular in the movie scene as Demon Slayer and JJK are, and it never will be. Same thing with the anime scene for the most part as well. Demon Slayer and Jujutsu Kaisen and any other successful anime movie are new gen. New gen anime get far greater attention because they were seasonal from the jump. It's a lot easier to build anticipation and set an expectation for animation quality for a seasonal anime than it is for one that was weekly, because people have to go with the long gap between content for the anime itself anyway. It's easy to wait for a movie when you have to wait for a season regardless, so these movies are easier to pitch in place of a season or in between season release dates because it's new content that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. One Piece would have had numerous movies before this God Valley one came out, and most of them by and large are flops. One Piece films haven't really been widely renowned since Stampede, and while Film Red did break records when it came out, a Film Red movie would blow a God Valley movie out of the water regardless, and I'll explain why later. A God Valley movie would not get enough traction to do well on its own because you'd have to have been caught up to One Piece to understand why a God Valley movie is so hype. Demon Slayer movies don't require you to know the entire story beforehand to understand why it's hype because there's basically no story in Demon Slayer. It's not slander, that's just the case. There's more story and connections in Thriller Bark than there is in the entirety of Demon Slayer. JJK Zero was a success because that's the first time we ever see anything concerning Yuta in that type of way, so it's more hype and can get anyone out to watch it because you only really need to know 3 characters in that movie, and that's Geto, Gojo, and Maki, who essentially have their connection to Yuta explained in the movie. A God Valley movie simply has too many parts for it to be a success the same way those other 3 were. You'd have to know a decent bit about Wano, a lot about Marineford, know the entire Reverie, everything that went on in the second half of Egghead, and then everything that happens in the prologue of Elbaf leading up to even want to watch the movie in the first place. One Piece simply doesn't have enough popularity to make people who have never watched One Piece before want to watch a God Valley movie, and even for those who do watch One Piece, you'd essentially have to have read the entire Loki flashback up until that point to even care about rocks. We as manga fans want it bad, but most One Piece fans don't even actually read the manga for it, at least in the West anyways. But this doesn't even apply to just God Valley, it would apply to any One Piece movie that's canon. One Piece has far too many moving parts and tie-ins for a standalone canon movie to mean anything to anyone who doesn't read the manga already. Let's say you made a One Piece film Oden and adapted the entire Oden flashback into a movie. You'd need to have watched Marineford to care about Whitebeard Roger, and you'd need to have watched the entire start of Wano as well to know why Oden is important, and you'd probably also need a little bit of Dressrosa and Punk Hazard to solidify that importance, as well as some of Zoe. You'd need to know a little bit about Fishman Island too to understand why that segment of the movie matters as well. Let's use another example, Marineford. If they made a Marineford movie right as Marineford was coming out, you need to have watched Sabaody, Amazon Lily and Impel Down before, as well as Jaya and the Break in Water 7 as well. There's too many things to know in context for anything big enough to be in a One Piece movie beforehand, and that won't sell to the vast majority of the audience. That's why One Piece movies are selling now, because they're just really hype, turn off your brain kind of movies. The story of Stampede makes zero sense in context to the main story, because where was Bullet at any point before this? Why does no one else know who Bullet is if he sailed on the Roger Pirates and was as strong as Rayleigh? And how does Luffy even beat someone as strong as Prime Rayleigh? Why does Mihawk just randomly show up and come face to face with Zoro in a movie? And why are two admirals here and just not helping fight Bullet? Same thing with Film Red. Film Red, while being a half-canon movie, is still an extremely turn your brain off kind of movie as well. One Piece movies only do well when they're standalone or don't connect back into the main story outside of the characters in the movie. I don't need to know why Sabo has the Mera Mera in the movie to watch it. I don't need to know why Hancock is so in love with Luffy to watch it. I don't need to know why the Supernova are beefing to watch it. I don't need to know why Shanks cares about the fate of the world to watch it. I do, however, need to know why the Rocks Pirates care about Shaki, why Rocks cares about God Valley, why I should care that Garp and Roger are on God Valley, why Roger and Garp are on God Valley to begin with, why Roger is even important at this point because the vast majority of One Piece fans have never even seen Roger without his mustache to know it's him for sure, as well as what the Holy Knights are, who Garling is, who Emu is, and why I should care that Emu is capable of turning Xebec into a monster, or why I should care that Whitebeard, Kaido, and Big Mom are on the island fighting alongside him. There's too many things to know beforehand for the movie to sell, and the only people who would actually care enough to buy and watch it are people who know those things beforehand. But let's say that's all irrelevant. Maybe their marketing is just that good to the point that they can sell the God Valley movie and trick people into watching it. What about the movie itself? Why would that as a concept be bad? Well, the reason God Valley as a concept outside the marketing is a bad idea is because it's simply too much stuff to adapt into a One Piece movie. If we cut out all the stuff you need to know beforehand with the extra arcs and just focus on what's in the Loki flashback, you would have 10 chapters of content between Rox's introduction to the end of God Valley. Literally everything in those chapters in between besides the Herald stuff are things you need to know to understand God Valley, and you can't even cut out the Herald stuff, otherwise it wouldn't be a canon movie for one, and two, you'd also be cutting out the vast majority of Rox's characterization and literally butchering his character. Seasonal One Piece is promising one episode for one chapter, so that's like 20 minutes for every chapter, let's say. For you to adapt a God Valley movie to any level of reasonability context-wise, you'd need to adapt 3 hours of content one for one, meaning minimal extra stuff, no extra fight scenes on God Valley besides what we see, no extra characterization moments in Shaki's bar, no extra characterization for any of the Holy Knights or Garling, and what you see in the manga is what you get in the movie. And that would still be an hour longer than Film Red was and an hour longer than Mugen Train or JJK Zero was. I don't know about you, but if I'm getting a God Valley movie, I want extra content, and I don't want them rushing through everything beforehand leading up to God Valley just so that they can add extra stuff for fights, but hey, that's just me. Maybe if Oda left a lot to the imagination for God Valley in the manga so that a movie would then be able to be made from it, you'd have a better argument, but he hasn't left much to the imagination for a movie or the anime to pick up from outside of fight scenes. A God Valley movie would simply be too long and too expensive for the level of return or justice they'd be able to do for it. The One Piece anime going seasonal is supposed to give us two things. One, better pacing, and two, better animation. The One Piece anime has been having movie level animation since Wano, and they know when and when not to hit hard for those scenes, so if God Valley gets animated in the actual anime itself, it's basically like getting it in a movie without having to limit yourself to the time frame or spending extra budget on marketing. And you could also get it in context with the rest of the series as you're watching it. Releasing God Valley as episodes is far more fruitful now that One Piece is actually going seasonal, and makes putting it into movie format basically pointless because you're going to have to release the movie as episodes anyways. Cutting essentially the entirety of the Loki flashback out to put it into a movie, rushing through most of it, and at best doing a one-for-one adaptation at an hour over an industry standard movie length makes no sense when the anime is seasonal regardless, especially since there would be 26 episodes in the season, so you can stretch God Valley as much as you want and give it as great animation as you want. If they're going to have to release the God Valley movie into episodes anyways to keep the story on track, that would incentivize people to just wait for the anime, because why would I buy the movie if it has to be in the anime regardless, as it's all canon information? It just makes no sense from every angle. But disregarding that as well and going into a point I made earlier about Film Red which pertains to marketing, is that a movie like God Valley, while being 1, too complex, 2, too rushed, and 3, too niche for most audiences, it would also have no Luffy or any character that people already care about to surround it. No character in the God Valley movie would even be in the top 20 of popular characters. It is incredibly hard to pitch or sell a movie on characters that people have either never seen before or have never seen enough of in the canon story to care about in a movie. Introducing Roxy Xebec in a One Piece movie will be one of the most atrocious decisions possible, because you're either making people think Xebec is a non-canon character, or that he's a by and large irrelevant character. No one outside of the people who read the manga care about the fact that Xebec is Blackbeard's father, and if they pitch the movie on Xebec being Blackbeard's father or Roger's rival, then people will care even less. I love Blackbeard. I really love Blackbeard. I love Blackbeard so much that seeing Rox get introduced as Blackbeard's dad made me want to start a YouTube channel. But most people don't like Blackbeard like that, and certainly not enough to buy a movie based around his father, who they've seen almost nothing about previously. Film Red only did well because Luffy and Shanks were in that movie. That's almost the entire reason that Film Red had record-breaking success, because you put two of the most popular characters with the longest history and greatest relationship in a movie together, when them being reunited is a major story plot point. One Piece movies are based around having the most popular characters in the movie. That's why the ones that do the best are these mega mashup endgame style films where a bunch of characters just happen to be in the movie. No one cares about Big Mom like that, no one cares about Kaido like that, and no one cares about Rayleigh like that. You may care, you may feel like other people should care, but Rayleigh isn't even close to as popular as Sanji. He's not even close to as popular as Brook or Carrot. Neither is Roger or Garp. You're trying to sell a movie on characters no one really cares about on the point in their lives that people care about the least, which is before Roger's era. Even trying to sell it on Emu, who is a recent villain and a big looming threat, doesn't really work because Emu doesn't show up until the end of God Valley and is only there for one chapter as far as dialogue goes, and doesn't do anything in the war besides turn Xebec into a demon. The movie makes no sense as a pitch. There are probably numerous things I'm overlooking that make it seem even worse to Toei or even better to Toei, but I'm basing it off what I see, and what I see is what would be a stellar film regardless gets shafted because no one would care about it enough to watch it in theaters outside of the niche manga readers, because the Loki flashback and Elbaf leading up into God Valley does not do anything as far as building Rox's hype until he gets into the Loki flashback. Rox being in the Loki flashback was a wild surprise, like completely left field out of nowhere type of surprise, which makes it suck for build up if you're trying to base a movie on him, because everything you'd have to do to build that hype would be in marketing, meaning most of his big reveals would be in promotional material and not in the actual story. But what could they do instead? It's easy to say why it won't happen, but what solution do you bring to the problem? Well, the pitches I have are nowhere near as good, but these are ideas I have on what a new One Piece movie would entail. First off, it has to have Luffy in it. You're not selling a One Piece movie for a lot without Luffy in it, and the only way you would ever sell a movie without Luffy in it is if you sold it solely on Shanks with info we've never gotten in the story. Second, it has to have another major character we know in it, someone important to the endgame or current stories, similar to Film Red. A film like Stampede is incredibly hard to make at this point because Luffy is too strong logically for anyone to be a threat to him, especially if his crew is with him. There are no new characters that you can make that you can write a backstory for to justify them being as strong as Luffy without redoing past One Piece movies. The Impel Down angle has already been used, the former Navy Admiral angle has already been used, the Child of an Emperor angle has already been used, the former Roger rival angle has already been used, and the hypothetical Warlord/Warlord rival angle has also already been used. The only other angles that are possible are hidden characters from special races or characters that would actively stay in hiding and only choose to come out now. Characters like someone or something from Elbaf, a Lunarian, a possible experiment from Vegapunk, or a member of the Davy clan that got sent somewhere by Kuma, maybe even a slave of Celestial Dragons or a former Holy Knight. I'm not sure about the stakes for the movie because One Piece movies are slowly starting to get into the Dragon Ball
fate of the universe on the line, or the Martians have the death beam pointed at Earth, you better hit it
type of danger, and I don't know how you continue upping the ante without going into space or having ancient weapons on the table, so the stakes for the next One Piece film will probably be less threatening than they were in Film Red, probably closer to what they were in Strong World or even Film Gold, where it's just someone Luffy really cares about at stake. The next One Piece movie could possibly include Blackbeard since the last one had Shanks in it, and it may be related to the Davy clan depending on when exactly it comes out. If the timeline of the movie is between Egghead and Elbaf in that intermission period, then it may be something related to either the Seraphim, a possible failed aged up or rogue Seraphim, or maybe a Holy Knight that got sent after the Straw Hats with some weird hacks abilities. One Piece movies kind of have to go in the direction of hacks and devil fruit based combatants because physically there's no way to top Douglas Bullet unless we're going to bring Shiki back as a movie antagonist, which isn't the craziest possibility ever. I think if the movie is to be related to Blackbeard, Kuzan would more than likely be in it as he's the greatest connection to the Straw Hats out of anyone working with Blackbeard and is also the most popular Blackbeard pirate outside of Blackbeard himself, and I don't see Luffy and Blackbeard fighting each other in a movie. Outside of God Valley, there's no real pitches that are obvious outside of something that is related to Blackbeard or the Holy Knights because they're the only obvious threats in the manga right now. I think the villain will more than likely be someone we've never seen that's related to one of the newer aspects of the story, unless Oda writes a One Piece Chapter 0 type manga backstory for the character before the movie happens like he did with Shiki and kind of for Uta. Again, like I said, One Piece movie stakes need to de-escalate from the whole saving the world type of threats. Saving a single important person keeps the stakes reasonable enough and the tension high enough. Maybe one of the Straw Hats gets captured, or maybe someone the Straw Hats know that isn't necessary to the narrative gets captured. Someone like Shirahoshi or Bonnie. The only Straw Hats that can be captured in a movie and still have us care is probably Usopp or Robin without retreading water from a previous movie. It can't be Nami because that's what Strong World did, it can't be Zoro because that's what Film Gold did, and it can't be Sanji because Whole Cake Island is too recent for them to do that, and any of the other Straw Hats aren't important enough for anyone to care in a movie if they are the one that gets captured. Obviously none of these are better pitches hype-wise than God Valley, but logically they are all much better from Toei's perspective because they can make the movie as hype as they need to since Luffy is in it anyways. A God Valley movie would be buns for the simple fact that Oda gave too much in the main story for it to adapt. If it was a case of him skipping over most of it to leave the anime to fill in the gaps, then it would make sense, but between the Shaki stuff, the human hunting tournament, Dragon and Shanks being there, the Davy clan lore, the actual fighting, Imu showing up, Imu and Rox's back and forth discussion, and then everything that we're supposed to see with Domi Reverse Sea Rocks leading into the end of God Valley with Xebec's death and Roger and Garp getting off the island, there is simply too much, and that's only if they do the start of God Valley. If they add the stuff with Rox and Harold fighting right before God Valley, Garland showing up to the Gorosei to pitch the idea of a human hunt at God Valley, Shaki being in the bar and getting captured, or any of the Shaki stuff before that point, they're looking at either an extremely rushed movie or a movie that's going to be 3 hours long. It is an extreme waste of what the God Valley section of the Loki flashback is supposed to be if they decide to adapt it into a 3-hour movie, and One Piece movies are usually less than 2 hours anyway, so there's absolutely no way they can cram everything into a reasonable time frame that would be satisfying for the audience. I know you're all going to disagree with me because God Valley is the one movie the English community wants to see, but we need to understand the reason they didn't make this movie earlier is the same exact reason why they aren't going to make it now. If they felt like introducing Rox before in a movie and thought it would have made them enough money, they would have done it before, because doing it now makes no difference because Rox would have to be introduced in the God Valley movie anyways, unless they're going to break up Loki's flashback for movie's sake and only adapt what happens on God Valley, which would just make it a balls to the wall, no context, straight battle from start to finish movie, which again, sure, but that's more than likely not how they're going to make it if they can do the exact same thing in the anime and have way more time. But enough about what I think, what do you think? Do you believe a God Valley movie is the best idea ever, or that it would be much better to have it in the anime instead? What could the next villain for a One Piece movie be if it's not going to be God Valley? And what do you think the plot for another One Piece movie after Film Red could be if it's not God Valley? As always, if you enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe, and stay tuned in for more high quality One Piece content. I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.